As far as peacekeeping is concerned, we have gone into it with the Ministry of Defense. We did not look at it as an overall part of our security and foreign policy. That's the change that I have made. This is a part of our foreign policy. This is a part of our security policy. Both these require peacekeeping. So therefore, in the new foreign policy of Sri Lanka, we are taking, for instance, one is peacekeeping, another is climate change, and many other aspects of which we are today an important part of international relations. It's no longer only the political connection or the political relation. In this respect, I've asked the Secretary of Defense and the service commanders of ensuring that we can make available more places for our neighbors, especially Maldives, and to the countries of Africa, that we will help in whichever way we can. And I have asked both the State Minister and the Chief of Defence Staff to visit these countries to let them know of our decision. In this respect, today you have presented a paper proposals on the Sri Lanka's role in UN peacekeeping. I must again congratulate you on it, and your recommendations certainly will be taken up by me and discussed with the relevant personnel. But in all this, you forgot one great institution, the most important one of them all in Sri Lanka. You want the Ministry of Defence and Ministry of Foreign Affairs to get together. All I want to say is that without the Ministry of Finance, everything else is useless. So we will add that also as we make recommendations of how to improve it. And I've taken note of what you have said of the training school. I'd like to see Sri Lanka having a bigger role in peacekeeping. But as the question came, the peacekeeping role itself is changing. This is different from the UN that was founded in 1945. There are independent players like Iran. Then there are the non-state actors that have come. So it's a more complex area in which the Security Council is finding it more difficult to come to an agreement because the complexity of geopolitics today. In fact, in Africa, the African Union has taken over some of the peacekeeping efforts and enforcement of law and order, which we are seeing now in the West African region, the questions that have come up. So you are operating in a very, very complex nature. And today it's been reflected. On one hand, you have the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is Russia on one side, the West on the other. The West idea that you could wear down Russia has not succeeded. So you may have a stalemate. You can't bring both sides together. Day before yesterday, President Zelensky was told there will be no more money coming from the US Congress. So that's now into in a way it has become a war between Russia, supported by China on one side, and a few of those countries, North Korea, and on the other hand, the West. The other matter is the countries like Sri Lanka. We are the neutral countries, the players, and what has happened is the economic sanctions imposed on Russia hasn't brought Russia down. But the Russian economy is now coming into the Middle East and to West Asia, into our countries. You see this when you see more and more Russian tourists coming in here, and Russians are trying to make investments even in Sri Lanka. So that's one conflict that's going on. You can't put the UN there because the differences between the parties. One party involved is a permanent member of the UN. Then you have Taiwan. Now they've gone beyond the Shanghai Agreement when America has promised support even to a government which wants to have an independent Taiwan. So that's another complex issue. How are you going to line the people up? How are they coming in? With that comes the role of China in the world, in the Indian Ocean. And you can see on one hand the different arrangements that are coming in. So that new development, when within this you find US, India, Japan, Australia forming one organization. And then you have another conflict going on, which I mentioned, is the war in Gaza. It was not triggered off by China or Russia or anyone. It's a non-state actor which has triggered off a war. It's taken off one of the mightiest military machines in the world. And Israel is fighting a military campaign, Hamas is fighting a political campaign. So in this war, it's the worst of what we have seen. 18,000 people killed, and Gaza, certainly the Gaza Strip, completely flattened by bombs. And prior to that, about 1,000 odd Israelis killed. in which the UN cannot intervene. These are the issues that we have. You have on one side the Libyan civil war, which was a result of Arab Spring and the inability to establish one single government. Now you're having, so within these complex areas that peacekeeping has to take place. So nature of peacekeeping has to change from 1947 or for the Congo civil war to what it is today. And the non-state actors are also becoming more powerful. Weaponry is becoming easier. It can be hope-made. So where do we end? Now this is a question we have to ask in the future. I always think that sometimes we may have to have a UN force to act against the overall drug operations in the world. It's becoming so powerful that in Colombia it virtually defeated the army in many occasions. In Ecuador they killed one presidential candidate at this election and they had killed one at the previous one. We see the problems that we have of non-state actors in the Western Indian Ocean. So will the UN at some stage even be forced to get together a group, a military mission, which may have to take on the drug cartels, which are becoming more and more powerful and may be in a position to overcome national governments in some parts of the world. So this is the future. As the politics evolve, the nature of the UN missions will also change. So always keep in mind that peacekeeping missions follow geopolitics. Geopolitics don't follow peacekeeping missions. So accordingly, you will see how it is transformed in the next few years. But it doesn't mean that we should opt out of it. Understanding this, we should plan to have more persons involved in a more complex situation than was ever envisaged when the UN was started in 1945.